Tomorrow, the restrictions on non-essential international travel will be eased and the new EU digital COVID cert comes into effect. But what does it all mean? Who can travel? Where? What do you need in order to be able to go? And can we really jet off worry-free with COVID cases rising both here and abroad? In a moment, we'll be speaking to the editor of Air and Travel magazine, Eoghan Corry. But first, our reporter Gail Conway has been speaking to travel agent Suzanne O'Leary, who runs O'Leary Travel in Wexford and Enniscorthy. She said they've had a huge volume of calls from people looking for information.
We have a lot of bookings coming through now for 2022 and for the October midterm break. But really, there's a hesitancy around the July, even into August travel for the moment, except for people, corporates. It's somewhat of a built-up must-do trips and visiting family. We're seeing that type of booking, all right. But the leisure, annual holiday, there's a little bit of a wait and see what happens in July and August. And to be honest, Gail, we're kind of saying that to our clients. Let's watch this first week or two of July, see how the airports are handling things, see how the DCC is panning out, because there's just so much uncertainty around all of that.
In relation to the hesitancy that you're experiencing, the uncertainty and maybe the advice that you're giving out, would you say you don't have enough information from the government, or is it just that you don't know how it's going to pan out?
I think we're very well able to tell people the detail that is definitely there. The DCC has been hugely successful this week with the rollout. It is very clear that people who are fully vaccinated, now we return to pre-COVID free movement of people within the EU. It's less clear for people who are going to be travelling on an antigen or a PCR test. And just in the short term, for people who are travelling who are recovered with COVID, they haven't yet got their certs, and the helpline is only really fully operational from Monday. So that is a huge element of the caution that's there. Wait till you have your piece of paper. In Dublin, getting testing is very readily available. For people out in rural Ireland, not so much so, and particularly antigen testing, which is much easier to access and much cheaper for the client, and it's all that is needed for most EU destinations. But within the ITA and within our different member groups, we're trying to resolve that on a commercial level ourselves.
Gail also spoke to bar owners in Tenerife to find out what inquiries they've been getting from Irish tourists. Fergal Flaherty runs the Hole in the Wall Irish Bar and the Soul Suite in Las Americas.
I don't think it'll be a huge influx of people, and for safety and business, I think it's best that it doesn't go back to a full-on the way it was, packed to the rafters. The summer season in Tenerife is normally our quiet season anyway. September is when it really happens for us. I know from Facebook, I'm getting messages every day. I'm getting ask me, are we going to open soon because we want to come over. I think it'll happen. It'll happen slow, and I hope it does happen slow. I don't want it to happen too quick. Yeah, I feel from the feedback we're getting, there's a lot of people ready to book once we open,
So from the people that have been in contact, do they have many questions for you?
One or two of them asked me, did I get vaccinated, and to make sure that the environment that they're in is safe. So I've obviously told them I have my 2 vaccines, I have my certificate, and the staff as well, We have to do our courses as well on the island here, our COVID courses with the government. So we have to get all them certs before we open as well, So we have to go by all the protocol that the government have put in place for opening,
Michael Murphy, and we run the Temple Bar, the Irish Fiddler and the Chieftain. Judging by the interest, we are expecting a bit of an influx, but we're not entirely sure, because when it comes to the whole digital passport and the restrictions, each country seems to have a different interpretation of what you can and can't do. Obviously, the UK is kind of operating different, and sometimes people are getting the restrictions from the UK mixed up with the restrictions from the EU. But judging by the interest, and a lot of our regular customers are very eager to come back, and they have inquired, and a lot of them have actually booked up and they said they're coming. So assuming there's no issues from the Irish side, we expect them to hopefully start rocking in next week.
And despite the rise in the Delta variant, would you be optimistic that this is the start of the recovery for your businesses?
Well, we would be optimistic. Obviously, there have been, over the last 16, 17 months, it's been very up and down. But at some stage, it does have to get to a point where we have to kind of live with this and move forward. So the feedback we have got is people are very much, they're tired of this whole situation and they just want to try and get back to some sort of normality. And hopefully this is a step towards that process.
That was Michael Murphy, who runs 3 bars in Tenerife. Eoghan Corry joins us now. Eoghan, there's a lot of confusion out there. Can you break it down for us as simply as possible? What is possible from tomorrow, and maybe more importantly, what's practical?
Fully vaccinated people with no children, all the restrictions are removed. That means no testing, no quarantine. Everybody else, it gets a little bit more complicated. What we're seeing is that there's been a consensus across Europe at arriving at an age of 12, that under 12 vaccinations and tests not arrived, Ireland will move our restriction from 6 to 12 tomorrow. So that seems to be a consensus across Europe. The other consensus that has been moved towards is that antigen tests are accepted outbound for those who are not fully vaccinated. PCR tests will be required on return.
It really is a case of buyer beware, though, isn't it? Because of the differences between countries. I'm thinking of the fact that, for example, Malta will only accept vaccinated tourists.
Yeah, Malta's a very interesting one because they've sort of said the family, turned away from the family market completely, but they would be unusual. This has been running obviously for 2 weeks elsewhere and it has worked really well. We did expect all sorts of problems when every other country introduced it on July the 1st. Even the rollout, with I think the exception of Romania, of the digital COVID certificates worked very well. So it is working, but it is working for those people who are entitled to the unrestricted travel offered by the full course of vaccination. That means double dose, and it means 14 days after your second dose. Where it gets complicated, it isn't. You can talk up the complications as well, because an antigen test is €45 compared with 90 or 95 for a PCR test outbound, and when all the members of the family don't have to get it, it reduces the cost.
Now, you mentioned the EU digital COVID cert there, and that becomes operational for Ireland tomorrow. But what can you do if you're due to travel and it hasn't come through yet?
Large number of people worried about this. What has been happening, and it's important to say this is not legislated for, but this is what has been happening. Immigration authorities across Europe have been accepting our card, the one you're given when you get your vaccination, and airlines have been accepting it for boarding purposes. As I said, that's not legislated for, and the rollout has been impressive. I mean, the serious amount of digital COVID certificates that have been delivered in the last few days. And given that not lots of people, as Suzanne said, are waiting, going to sit out July and see how the first fortnight go, it shouldn't be that big a problem. But that is the situation on the ground, is that it's been accepted.
Of course, while we can travel internationally from tomorrow, a lot of people are going to be asking, should we travel, given the rise in COVID cases, both here and abroad?
Advice is the same as before COVID arrived. If you feel endangered or feel unhappy with travelling, before your trip is the time to pull out. Both of our major airlines, Ryanair and Aer Lingus, have very generous cancellation policies that you can move your flight forward. Once you've started your journey, it's really up to the captain of the aircraft to decide safety protocol. The aviation industry has worked for over a year to get things right, and they don't want to endanger their own crew. So masking on board is mandatory. You'll be masked, wearing a mask through the airport. You will be checked. You will be asked for that key COVID documentation twice. You'll be asked at the gate before you board and by the immigration authorities. But given the amount of paperwork involved, to have it on one QR code is quite awesome technology. And both Ryanair and Aer Lingus enable you to upload that QR code, your COVID documentation, before you travel, so they can be checked easily.
Eoghan Corry, travel and tourism expert, thank you for joining us.